Welcome back to yet another Mortgage podcast. This is Kelly Yale. I am delighted today to be joined by the one and only Taylor Stork. With more than 25 years in this wonderful mortgage industry, he currently is the Chief Operating Officer at Developers Mortgage. He's also the president of the Community Home Lenders of America. He serves as an advisory council member for the Lenders One Mortgage Cooperative. And I think he is the most oft requested podcast guest I have seen on LinkedIn. But everyone, please help me welcome Taylor Stork. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Kelly. So is there like a laughter track? I think there should be a laughter track right now. That's like, there's the applause track and then there's the laughter track.
Honestly, I would so add it in. Like, I need one of those guys like Howard Stern has, like
You need
where
the
they
button.
all the buttons. Yes.
Right. And then when I say something stupid, you can be like, wah, wah, wah.
Oh, I love this. Okay. You know what? This is why you and I need to host one together. We'll do a weekly one and we'll have like the background noise and stuff. It'll be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, what I love so much about getting to do these podcasts, right? One, obviously, is having conversations with people who I truly love and respect in the industry. And the other is learning such cool things. When I ask you to give me some background, and I had no idea you lived on a farm. So tell us what kind of farm you are on, where it's at, what kind of animals you have. We want to know.
Yeah. So, and I'm like the most unlikely farm liver that there is. Actually, it's in my family, but not me. I grew up in Southern California on kind of a postage stamp of a house lot in your typical subdivision in San Diego. But my family's military, so we moved around a lot when I was little, and that's how we ended up in San Diego, so to speak. My dad's side is all Montana and like ranchers, and my grandfather was like a professional cowboy at one point in his career. I still have his hat. And then on my mom's side, they were legit farmers, like crop farmers, corn and beans and Iowa, Illinois, things like that. So I have it in my family, and then I don't know, I stumbled into it by accident, kind of. Ironically, I live in New Jersey, which it's the Garden State, but it's not what you think of as like a farm place. But I do live on a farm, and I've put up a couple of videos here and there for people walking around my place, and I've got horses, and I don't have any cows right now. I had cows, and then I'm not a vegetarian, so there's that. And I will have cows again at some point. And but right now it's all horses and a litter of dogs.
So making sure I heard you right, you just ate all your cows as he drinks out of the cow mug.
Like my cow mug?
I turned them all into mugs. Oh my God, I love this. So a New Jersey farm. You don't hear that a lot. I mean, to be fair.
Yeah.
That is amazing. So like, do you have like chores that you have to do every day and things like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, believe it or not, I've never had pigs because pigs are kind of gross. But I had a young guy that rented some space from me, and we had like 18 or 20 pigs at one point running around here. At one point, I had like 1,000 chickens. That didn't work out really well. But chores. So mostly, I have to mow fields all the time, and I have to go move trees out of the way that fall in the woods, and just kind of mostly care for the land. Every once in a while, I get stuck moving big piles of manure because, there's horses and there's stuff that horses make, and that has to get dealt with. So my weekends are often on a tractor or on a backhoe or out in a field somewhere.
That's amazing, but it probably gives you some excellent downtime from kind of, the ability to empty your brain a little bit or let your brain kind of run. Which kind of guy are you?
Well, so I have a voracious appetite for books and podcasts and anything that I can learn from. And so most of my time on the weekends, if I'm on a tractor or dealing with something farm related, I've got my earphones in and I've got Audible, or I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm catching up on podcasts. That's how I decompress.
Have you listened to something in the last few months that has really stuck with you, that you've been telling people about?
Yeah, I'm sure I have. One of my favorites that I like I'm such a nerd. I'll listen to books 3, 4, 5 times and get new things out of them. So probably my favorite is Never Split the Difference,
Oh
which
yeah.
and I've met Chris Voss. He's great. I use his techniques all the time. Don't tell anybody; they might figure it out. But I do a lot of books, a lot of audiobooks.
It's awesome. So, being a COO at a mortgage company at the end of the year, it means, you're probably thinking a lot sort of about the future, but what do you love about being a COO? And, what are you doing right now that's impactful for the company, do you think?
Getting on your podcast and telling them about it. That's what
Out there.
It's interesting, right? Because what is a COO? I mean, everybody thinks it's some big important title. In my world, COO means chief cook and bottle washer.
Yep.
I need to come up with a different bottle washer though. So if you can, cookware washer, maybe chief cookware washer. So I deal with all kinds of different stuff in a lot of different places in the mortgage space. I'm fundamentally a sales guy. I grew up cutting my teeth selling loans and still maintain my license. And in fact, I think I've got one loan in the pipeline right now. I will occasionally do a loan for, friends and family and, certain circumstances just to maintain myself and keep my credibility. So I'm fundamentally a sales guy, but I also put a lot of focus into technology and how we can leverage technology in different ways, try to do emerging things. And as you know, I do a lot of policy stuff. I'm very interested not only in making mortgages, but making a mortgage business industry function and making sure that the world we live in is conducive to having a healthy mortgage industry. Because if we don't have a healthy mortgage industry, we do not have a healthy housing environment. And if we don't have a healthy housing environment, we don't have people in houses. I grew up in Southern California. My dad, I mentioned, was ex-military. He fought in Vietnam and before that, Korea. And when he retired, he spent the remainder of his professional career, which is, 20 some odd years, rehabilitating homeless veterans. And so housing and being a homeowner and being in a home has been part of the fabric of my DNA since a very young age. And for me, mortgages aren't just about DTIs and LTVs and making sure a commission check clears. It's about making sure that people have a home to raise their kids and build a family, and that it's safe where they can sleep at night. And so that's why I focus my efforts not just on closing more loans, but also on how to make the experience better and how to make sure that our industry is fortified against some negative forces that, it's not easy to be in the housing industry. It's not easy to make mortgages.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. It's interesting that you mentioned technology, and then you talk about the passion that you have for giving everyone access to this pathway to a home, right? And I couldn't agree with you more. And when I used to, not that I used to, but in building mortgage technology, we sold it to loan officers. So people would always say, well, the loan officer is your client. And I would say, but no, they are my client, but the focus is creating so much understanding around what it is to own, to prepare to own, to live in, all of the things that people truly need to consider when they're making this decision for their life, right? And that was what I was so passionate about, was really making sure that the communication that the loan officer had to that customer was enough to make them feel confident in jumping into something that a lot of people find intimidating.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I came up in the industry, the realtor was our client. That's what I was taught, right?
Right.
The realtor is your customer. The realtor is your customer. And then in the last, 10 or 15 years, it's kind of transitioned a little bit, and it's like more like the loan officer is your customer.
Right.
And I understand the perspective and I get it, but I'm not putting realtors in houses. I'm not putting maybe I'm putting loan officers in houses. I'm putting people into homes, right? Mm-hmm. And so I believe, and I could be wrong, I am on a regular basis. But I believe that if the customer, the buyer, the homeowner is our focus, and all of our focuses are aligned, be it the loan officer, the realtor, the closing attorney, the CPA, the lender, if we all focus on making sure that the customer, the end buyer, the family that's going to raise their children and play in the backyard in that house, if we make them our priority, then we're all doing the right thing. And if they're not our priority, then maybe we're doing the right thing and maybe we're not.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's one of the things I learned very quickly in listening to you and also having conversations with you. I think that, you know, being an advocate for the home buyer, right? It takes kind of a special heart to do that. And I don't assume that most, realtors, most loan officers don't have that exact same goal in mind. But I think that there are some of us that are so laser beam focused on it because we want to do right by humans, all the time. Like, if you're not ready to buy a house, man, I want you to have that information. I want you to understand that. And if a house is 5 years away from you, I don't want you to think you're not worth a conversation or worth a relationship in those 5 years where we can prepare you for what it's going to be like to own a home. And I think that's a different approach than most have taken in the past in mortgage. Would you agree?
Well, I don't know how I disagree with you when you ask me if I agree with you. So yes.
You can disagree.
What I would say is that we've watched the average age of the first time home buyer steadily increase.
Yeah.
Today it's like 38. It used to be 34. Before that it was 30. And I think that there are some macroeconomic reasons that it increases, but I also think that there are some environmental and behavioral reasons that it is increasing. And I think some of that is the fear, fear isn't the right word. The lack of understanding and the lack of awareness for what they can do and why they should. And we see that it's far more pronounced in the non-white community than it is in the white community. It's more pronounced between genders. It's more pronounced in the female versus male gender as well. And that is a disservice. So those of us that have the knowledge, that have been doing this for a few years, that have been around the block a couple of times, and been around the block once or twice, those of us that have the knowledge, I kind of feel like paying it forward is paying it backwards in this case. And it is incumbent upon those of us who know how to help people and know that they need the direction and the help to help them.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And one of the things I hope I try to convey all the time too is this concept that you have to know your customer and you have to start a relationship with them, period, right? They may not be your customer for a long time, but you also have to make sure that you understand what it is that they need and that your communication speaks to that, right? So for, a huge buying segment right now, right, is single women.
Yeah.
But in the mortgage industry, we just believe that everyone should get emails from us with like a happy couple on the front porch holding a key. And we don't pay attention to what it is that we send. And so a lot of times the things that we say or the way that we market or the way that we sell can seem a little tone deaf, and that is incredibly true. And I've been making fun of this for 12 years now, right? It's also all white marketing. Right. And we have to be so careful of that, too. We have to make sure that we're representing everyone in what we send, because people want to do relationships, and do sales and have these things with people who they really understand and feel like they understand, are understood by those people. So we have to make our messaging reflective of the different states that people are in, the different, economic areas that people are in, and honestly, the different kind of backgrounds that people bring when they want to buy a home.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a catch-22, right? So you may have noticed that I'm a white guy, and there's not a lot that I can do to change that. Pero yo hablo español y la primera aplicación de préstamo que yo tenía fue cuando fue joven. Es la primera que tenía cuando fue una oficialidad de los préstamos. I started my career taking loan applications in Spanish. That was my very first job, was to take loan applications in Spanish. And so while I agree with you that we need that as an industry, we should pay attention to tone, I don't agree with you that we have to somehow magically emulate the people that we're trying to serve, right? I serve women. I'm not one, but that doesn't mean that I work any less hard to try to be an advocate for them and to meet the needs of those members of the society, of our society. And I think that there is actually a blessing in that perhaps my station in life was influenced by the way I was born. And so I have a responsibility to share that benefit with those who didn't have that opportunity.
So from a marketing angle, I understand and I agree. But I also believe and have been, well, it's been challenging to actually champion like bilingual. I mean, we have a bilingual application, right? So we have a Spanish speaking application through, most people will have it, or through their POS or their LOS. But a lot of marketing is not done in people's native language. And for me, I don't understand. If I were trying to buy a house and I didn't speak English well, the one thing that would really be impactful to me would be understanding it in my own language.
Yeah, well, try understanding it in different Spanish, right? So
yeah,
people don't realize, if you're not a Spanish speaker, I learned Castilian Spanish, but there's like 10 different versions of Spanish.
right.
And, you know, I talk to people that are natively Puerto Rican or Colombian or from Mexico or from the Dominican, and I say things that make no sense. Of course, I also am not a great Spanish speaker, so I might just be saying things that don't make any sense. It can go either way.
Yeah, 100%. And it's challenging, right? That's one of the big challenges I think that we have, is serving the Spanish speaking community at a really high level. But I think it's something that if we're not kind of trying to solve for right now, and we were trying to solve for it 10 years ago, but it just hit a wall. And I'm interested to see sort of where that goes, because there's so many super, super talented loan officers too, right? Who are building these massive careers because they are native Spanish speakers and they really do a good job. So, but you said
it's more than the language, Kelly. I think that
yeah.
the language is important, but I also think there's a cultural sense of trust. And in my experience, and my experience is not everyone's, but in my experience, even though I'm a güero that can barely put together two Spanish words and make it sound right, simply by virtue of the fact that I try shows a level of respect and empathy for the people that I'm trying to serve. And it also signals to them, I think, it signals that I'm willing to not know what I am talking about and say things the wrong way. So it's okay if broken English isn't exactly perfect also.
Right.
And I think that simply letting your guard down and being a little vulnerable goes a long way.
100%, especially, yeah, in getting people to trust you and showing people that, absolutely, I completely agree. I wanted to go back to something that you said, because it was one of the very first conversations that we had. And, you know,
I'm an NDA for that. What did I say?
No, we were, you did. It's totally fine. You are a true advocate for women in this industry.
Yeah.
And that is humbly a very rare human. And I would like to talk about what it is and why that drives you so much, because it is probably the thing I respect most about you, is that you're not quiet about it. And I think that's amazing. So can you tell a little bit about your backstory of why that became so important to you?
You know, it's a hard question for me to answer, because it has probably been such I don't know, it's just always been there. I was very influenced by a loving mother and two hugely loving sisters. And to this day, it was my sister that got me into the mortgage business and has shepherded my career for many years. And she continues to be, you know, arguably my closest friend and my mentor at the same time, which is kind of weird because she's my big sis. And she used to pin me down to the ground and, you know, pretend like she was going to spit on my face. Kelly, I have this kind of belief that any group, any organization, any industry, any societal structure is a healthier structure when there's a diversity of voices. And when there is too much male and too much masculine and not nearly enough feminine, everything gets out of whack. And a good counterbalance is important. And it's interesting. I've seen this dynamic play out in so many places. When there's too many guys and like not enough women or zero women, things get really awkward. There's this weird competition thing that can often start. There's a lot of peacocking that goes on. And I've seen it in the reverse. Like when there's too many women and, one guy in the room, it can be kind of strange. So I've always believed, and if you look at mortgage historically, I mean, there's a certain reality. They look like me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blonde hair, blue eyes, like as somebody likes to call me, pasty white guy from New Jersey. I don't know. I have a nickname. I'm kind of pasty today. So I fundamentally believe that this industry can be better served, and then in kind, our customers and our constituents can be better served when we have a solid balance of leadership and representation across both genders. I think it's better, just in general. I just think it's better. And I also think, and I said this earlier, I was born the way I was born, and I probably have some benefits from that. And so it's incumbent on me to share whatever benefits I have with whoever didn't get them.
I love that. I also just love too that it's something that you're acutely aware of, and it seems like something you're also passionate about resolving, especially in whatever ripple effect that you can, right? And for me, that's a lot more than the majority of people do. And I am challenged all the time by the way that people are really honest about how they feel until they have to do it publicly. Because if more men in the industry knew how the women of the industry felt, I think they would be stunned, right? But we don't say stuff, right? Because if you say something, then you're kind of like
you got all the societal and
so
role or this other thing, and then you have your own, like, there's also inside the peer group culture, right? Yeah. Inside the peer group, they're like, shh, don't say too much. So no, I think all that stuff goes on. But listen, let's be honest. This is also selfish. I mean, I am fundamentally opportunistic. There are really great women in roles that could be in more important roles that are undervalued, and that's an opportunity. I mean, let's talk about profit motive. What a great opportunity. If people are overlooked and they're more valuable than they are getting credit for their value, let's go extract some of that value. That's what great entrepreneurs do, is find opportunities and then figure out how to bring those opportunities to market. It's the same with people. It's no different. Find the good ones. And this is something that I try to do actively. And it's not men versus women. I do it across the board. But I fundamentally believe that there are great people in this mortgage business, and that there's a couple of maybe not as great people. And it is incumbent on those of us that believe that good people should rise to the top to make sure that they rise, right? To find great people and make sure that they are lifted up, and that they get the attention, and that they get the opportunities, and that they get the education, and then they get the mentoring, and because everybody needs a hand up. And if you're in a position to give it, you should give it. You should give it the hand up. Sorry, my coffee is kicking in. I've had a little caffeine today.
No, I mean, look, you're saying what is true, but I'm going to challenge you to say something. Like, here's my point on that. How many out of 100 C-suite have that same mentality? Like, I want to really develop and mentor the next generation of really talented people, or do you think we spend way more time just trying to find new salespeople that we can recruit?
I don't know if it's too much time or not enough time. I can't quantify that. I don't know. What I do know is that I believe sometimes people are hesitant to put themselves out there for fear that it could be criticized, right? And that happens with everybody. It happens with me. I don't want to put myself out there. If I do something that people might think is not a good idea, then people will think I have not good ideas and that I'm not a good idea and that I should not be a good idea, right? So we all have imposter syndrome. Every single one of us does. Every one of us still is trying to figure out how in the world we got to where we are. If we don't, then we're probably narcissists, which I've been told I might be. So, but in all fairness, we all have it and struggle with it. Everybody that I know struggles with it. Maybe they don't admit it, but they do. It's hard to struggle with your own internal kind of feelings of self-worth and try to be vulnerable and all that kind of stuff, and also put yourself out there and help others. It's challenging. And people that are C levels are no different than people that are SVP levels, or no different than people that are VP levels. Same people. They used to be a VP, then they became an SVP, and now they're a C. It's the same people. They really haven't outrun whatever their demons are. They just have a different title. They still do things and think exactly the way you do. So all the same insecurities that you have, so does the next guy or gal.
I think we could do a podcast just on this one topic alone. I really do.
You had no idea this was going to go this direction. You thought we were talking about
I know. Like, okay, you know what? I'll toss you a mortgage question. You know, what do you think is going to surprise this industry?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to make you put the hat on at the end anyway, because it's very, very rancher. You're a straight up cowboy. We just did not know. But really, what, like, if we're going to, you know, what do you really think is waiting for us in 2025? Because it's definitely not, you know, everyone's going to be like, oh, raise XYZ, but like, really, what do you believe is gonna change in 2025 for us?
I'm waiting for Santa Claus to show up.
Are you? Is he going to bring a big bag of lower rates?
I don't think so.
No, yeah, I don't either.
I don't think so. Look, I mean, I've talked about this with a few people, and I've talked about it a little bit publicly. I don't like to harp on it, but we have a lot of focus on what interest rates are going to do. Everybody's watching interest rates, and you know, is the Fed going to cut? Is this going to happen? Is that thing going to happen? I don't know that it's nearly as materially important as everybody in relation to the amount of time and thought and focus we all put into it. You know, I'm in New Jersey and it's raining. Is the sun going to come out tomorrow? I don't know. Maybe. Will it come out sooner or later? Yeah, it'll definitely come out sooner or later. Is my life going to change if it comes out 3 days from now instead of tomorrow? Probably not. Interest rates are important for the purposes of getting borrowers qualified, and they're important for making sure that we have a robust housing market. Historically, an interest rate between 5% and 7% is the band of interest rates that have gone back about 300 years in this country for real property. So we are kind of right in the window. We're at the top of it, but we're in the window. And I know that that's probably not going to make you feel great, but I think that over the last 20 years, we've gotten really comfortable with a concept that interest rates are going to come down and down and down and down and down and down. And we just keep on, you know, riding that wave down. And then suddenly it stopped going down for a while. And we had a hard time understanding, like, what happened? What do you mean the rates aren't going down? They got to go down lower. If they go down too much lower than where they hit bottom, we were going to come to zero soon. Let's remember, I did a loan at a 2% interest rate for somebody, and circa 2021. And I was that's basically free money, PS, right? Because the average inflation is 3% over like history. So when you look at a 2% rate and a 3% historical inflationary, model, you're getting paid to borrow money, net. There's a lot of people banking on a refi boom, and that's going to somehow make life better. And I don't subscribe to that theory. And I don't subscribe to that theory for two reasons. The first reason is I got into this business very young, 20 some odd years ago, and I was taught to go find purchase business and that refinances were gravy and extra and nice to have. I was also taught that those same refinances would distract me from building relationships, and that those same refinances tended to be highly commoditized and rate specific and weren't going to do anything to help me, engage more realtors and get more referrals. And I continue to follow that kind of basic theory. The second reason is that our environment has changed. So if you look at the outstanding vintage of mortgages today, roughly 70% of the outstanding mortgages that exist in America were originated between 21 and 22, 20 and 22.
Right.
Kind of in that 2 to 4% window. And those are the loans that are not going to refinance. Nobody's refinancing a 2% interest rate unless there's a gun to their head because they have to, I don't know, probably not the best example, but they're highly unlikely to make a refinance on that. They'll do a second, throw a HELOC on it, and maybe eventually they'll find a good reason to consolidate that stuff. But in the interim, I don't see somebody doing a rate and term refi from 2 to 5. Having said that, so if 70% of the loans are just fundamentally untouchable, then that leaves 30%. Of the 30%, a lot of the loans that we've done in the last 18 months-ish are what you would be looking at doing, right? You wouldn't be looking at doing the loans from 2018 because in 2018, we were in the 6s. Right? We were in the 5s to the 6s, creeping our way up. So probably that 17, 18, 19 stuff, you're not going to really touch a lot, maybe a little bit. You're really looking at the stuff that is 18 to 24 months old, right? All right, so let's talk about what's happened since 18 to 24 months ago happened. First of all, the overwhelming majority of the loans we did in the last 18 to 24 were high DTI loans, right? Because rates were higher and we were struggling to get those borrowers qualified. So if you look at the credit box and you look at the conventionals and you look at a scatter chart, the scatter chart shows that there was a significantly higher number of loans or proportion of loans that were in that kind of 45 to 49 DTI range. And then if you look at the same thing for FHAs, it's like 50 to 55, right? And when you look at the large number of loans in that high end of the box on the DTI side, and then go look at what today's homeowners insurance rate is compared to 2 years ago when you closed that loan, their homeowners has gone up 40%. Wow. Their taxes have gone up 20%, give or take, right? You add in the new DTI numbers with today's homeowners premium and today's property tax payment, and you swallow all of the difference in rate improvement, some of those borrowers are going to have a real hard time qualifying. Because loans that we did at a 45 DTI, 18 months ago, you're not going to get a 49 DTI today. It's going to be 53 or whatever. So I think that there's a component or a subsection of, so if you think 70% off the chart, 30% left, some part of that 30% is vintage pre-2020. I don't know what the number is, but let's pretend like it's a third of it. So let's leave 10%. Let's take 10% of that out. So that leaves you with 20%. Of the 20%, I would guess, I don't know, pick a number. 2/3 of it is high DTI stuff, at least 2/3, and then probably being conservative. So what does that leave us with? 16%-ish of the outstanding vintage loans might be eligible to refinance, maybe. Okay, now let's talk about servicers. 10 years ago, servicers were not good at refinancing loans.
Right.
Actually really pretty bad at it. And their recapture rates were unbelievably low, like 10%. Guess what servicers are extremely good at doing today? Mm-hmm. They're really good at refinancing loans, like super good, like AI, right? they're bragging 60, 70, I've heard 80% recapture rates. And they can get to the loan faster than a non-servicing originator can. And the reason they can get there faster is they can do that loan at a discount, right? So a servicer can do that loan at a 102-ish price and be profitable, because really what they're doing is they're protecting their runoff. They don't really need to make like a commission on the deal.
Right.
So they can do it at like a 102 where either, a broker or a distributor retail originator needs to be really like 103 plus, and maybe 102 and a half. I'm sure somebody's going to want to argue with me over the numbers, but fundamentally they can do it for less money, which means they can be in the money for a refinance sooner, right? So that means that a servicer can be talking to a customer about a price that makes sense 2, 3, 4, 6 months before a street originator can. And what that all means is we're not going to do a bunch of refis. We're just not.
I agree. I think, when I started to take, if I go in a time machine back to 2012, I had worked at a mortgage company for a couple of months, and I was trying to sort of create an agenda to like really, really reach out to the realtors in the area. And I remember my branch manager said, "Oh, that's a waste of time. When we're in a refi boom, nobody cares about realtors." And I always harken back to that moment of my life because I so fundamentally disagreed with what he was saying, but I wasn't any sort of expert in mortgage. And, I didn't really know if that was sort of behaviorally kind of what we did or not, or didn't do. But for my experience, right, those, like you said, refis were more the gravy. Refis were not the thing we built our business on. They were the things that we, were fortunate to be able to sort of do when we did. And when we would get a dip, that would be a great time to do some. And, I kept my focus on purchase. And I think everyone was so thirsty for a win for the last 3 or 4 years that a refi boom felt a little bit like a win, and I didn't want people to not get a win.
Yeah, we don't want to tell the kids that Santa Claus isn't coming. So
exactly.
3 o'clock in the morning, we go put some packages under the tree and go, "Hey, look,
yeah,
there's presents."
And I, everyone kind of feeling the same sort of fatigue from it all, but I don't think, look, we live in a world where people are going to want to move and they're going to want to buy these houses. And we've got obviously a mountain to kind of climb with that, with people, like you said, in these low interest loans that they're in right now, housing being more expensive than it's ever been. In New Jersey, you must see it. In Charlotte, where I live, I wouldn't begin to pay half of what some of these people are paying for these houses. And so I'm fascinated to kind of see what it's going to do in 25. But I agree with you that the refi boom seems unlikely, but that the lean in really should be, this is our new normal. And people are going to buy, and we've got to figure out how we become relevant and important and a part of a meaningful conversation with them as to what that path looks like.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity. So I don't want you to think for 1 second that I'm negative on this.
Yeah.
It's great. And I'm sure there are some people that are like, okay, what is this idiot saying? How is it great that there's not going to be a refi boom? The opportunity to demonstrate value is to actually put people into homes,
right?
Not like refinance the loans they already had. So, and that's the value of that an originator, that a loan officer, that a mortgage broker brings to the table. It's not that they're able to process paperwork faster than somebody else, because that's all a refinance is processing paperwork. A purchase is a transaction where you put a family in a home. That's where you help people decide. It's the opportunity that we have to do more than just mortgage, to talk to them about their lives, to talk about them, the bigger picture, to talk about how their kids are. I mean, the average age of the first-time home buyer is now 38 years old. Guess what? They have kids. They have adult kids. If 38-year-old, they have they got old kids. That's just the reality. Their kids are going to be ready to buy a house pretty soon. That is an opportunity to distinguish yourself. I am very, very optimistic on 2025. And here are the reasons why. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I don't see a refi boom coming. And there will be lots of refinances. I just don't think we're going to do them. I think that the servicers are going to gobble them up, through online applications in 15 seconds, and they're going to use AI, and you're never even going to know that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the opportunity is that I think we're going to have a strong purchase market. Now, when I say no refi boom, I really mean rate and term refi. There's tremendous opportunity to help people restructure their outstanding debt, which is not exactly the same thing. We are seeing credit card levels at the highest they've been ever, like ever, not since sometime other time, ever. And we're watching people live off of their credit cards, literally. We're also watching student loans that, nobody had to pay on for several years. Suddenly you got to make payments on them. That's another reason that there's going to be a refi challenge, because now we got to include the student loans. There's tremendous opportunity to work a referral network, to work through financial planners, CPAs, all kinds of different people, and help consumers understand how they can reorganize and manage their household finances, and how the mortgage can be a component of that discussion. I would encourage anybody that feels as though refinances are historically what they do to look more closely at how to utilize the kind of financial reorganization concept as the tool, and use that to develop relationships with referral sources that can then introduce you to purchases. The purchase side, I think that the market's going to be great. I think that there's a lot of signs pointing toward a stronger, more robust housing market that increases. I think we're going to see more appreciation, not less. I think that that's a good thing, not a bad thing. I realize that puts some downward pressure on homeownership, affordability, but I also know that builds wealth simultaneously and creates new opportunity for people to tap into their equity. And then those that are buying now are going to see and appreciate those equity gains in the future. And the conversation to be had with borrowers, buyers, prospective buyers, adult children of your past customers, the conversation to be had with realtors, CPAs, financial planners, unions, firehouses. Buy a house now before it gets more expensive. And let me show you how to do it. Because in 2 years, the houses we're looking at today are going to be 20% more.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, amazing stuff in there. I really appreciate your insights. You talk about this in a way that shows how passionate you are about the industry itself and helping people, right? But giving opportunities to lots of people. And I think that I agree with you. I am more optimistic about 25 than I have been in a really long time. And I think that the people who have journeyed this path of staying in the game this whole time, the way that we're kind of, we've really been through something all together, right? And I think people probably felt that way in 2008. That was before my time in this industry. But, this has really caused the cream to rise to the top, right? The people who really want to be in the game are in it. And I think that they are going to have a lot of success. But I really appreciate your time and you coming on here. I could probably have you on like literally every week, because I think people need to hear voices like yours, that are truthful and reassuring at the same time.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do it. I love talking and hearing myself. No, that's a terrible thing to do.
Oh my God, same. Like we're twins.
And here's the irony thing. The irony is that we ended up talking all like kind of origination mortgage stuff. And I am like at my core, I'm a salesperson. I'm a loan officer. Let's just call it what it is. But I do a lot of policy stuff and advocacy stuff. And we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about tech. I do a lot of tech stuff.
I figured if we talked about tech, this is what my thought process was about us talking about tech. I figured we wouldn't talk about anything else. And I just feel like, or we would end up spewing out like an entire new system that we would need to then create.
We'll just whiteboard it live on a show.
I swear to God. And people will come up and be like, hey, thanks for the intellectual property. This is the best podcast ever.
Everybody watching this podcast has to sign an NDA.
Yeah. That's good. We're just going to start a new one called Must Sign an NDA. That's the new loan officer podcast. Well, listen, friend, thank you so much for your time today. Everyone should follow Taylor in social media, in my humble opinion.
Yeah,
Especially
I have like 13 followers. I'm trying to get to 14 or
oh,
14. So
ooh.
these, like,
Yeah. So,
Kelly, you're like one of these important social media influencer mortgage people. I'm trying to get, there's some magical list with all these people, and I'm looking up at it with binoculars.
well, I would say this as a professional marketer and hopefully thought leader, that the only thing that stands between you and having like an entire audience is just having conversations like this, because I don't ever talk to you where we're talking less than an hour, and I leave every conversation understanding things so much better. And I know that if that's true of me, it's true of everybody. So the more video you put out and the more you get in front of people, man, I tell you, I learned so much from you, and I'm super grateful to have had you on today.
Well, you are very kind and flattering and misguided. So
honestly, probably the truest way to describe me.
Yeah.
All right, friend. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right.